lovely quilt behind you. Did you make that?
There's a wonderful story about the quilt. 2 years ago on Valentine's Day, 4 women came to my doorstep and said they're part of about 20 women who are in a group called Wrapped in Love for Justice and spent 6 months making this quilt. And each square is a different organization I either started or a key part of my life. Jane is one of the squares. This one is Jane. I don't know if you can.
Yeah.
It says before row Jane. So I value it a great deal. And anyone who acknowledges the quilt, I say, oh, that's a good person.
Well, just so you know, one of Jonas's new hobbies is that he started quilting.
Ah.
Yeah. It's a beautiful quilt.
Yeah.
And amazing that you have started that many organizations. I mean, pretty wild.
Yeah. It's there to also hide a multitude of sins behind it. My name's Heather Booth.
So Heather Booth is a pretty amazing individual. And when her son reached out to us saying, hey, I'm Heather Booth's son, would you like to talk to my mom? We were kind of floored because, many years ago had read the book about the Jane Collective and knew about her work. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Heather Booth, she was one of the founders of the Jane Collective.
The Jane Collective was an underground abortion counseling and then provision service that provided abortions to women in Chicago in the years leading up to Roe v. Wade.
Which was pretty radical.
Yeah. And the way it would work is people sort of by word of mouth knew to call Jane, and they would call a phone number and ask for Jane, and then a Jane would answer the phone and give information about where to meet and where someone could get care and the cost of that care, and also take down some medical information about the person, and then they would be able to meet the person, to bring them somewhere and provide them care.
And Heather has been a lifelong activist, and she, at the age of 80, continues in her activism work. I mean, we got off this interview with her and we were floored, and we were also just like, man, this woman can't stop, won't stop.
Yeah, she is, amazingly inspiring.
Yeah. So we're excited today to share our conversation with Heather with you all because she's incredibly inspiring and has been through a lot of ups and downs of the reproductive rights movement. And she can really speak to what happens when a few feisty, energetic people get together and decide that it's time for things to change.
I am so glad to be part of this podcast series, that Beverly and Jonas and the people who are working with you, that you're telling the stories of people who've struggled for the freedom for women to make the most intimate decision about our lives, about when or whether or with whom we have a child. And it's a decision that no politician should interfere with. And it's wonderful that you're telling these stories and passing them on, and all of you listening to this podcast or spreading the story. You are part of the future of what will make our lives better in the future, with greater freedom, greater access, greater health and support, so that we can all live our fullest lives. So whether you're listening, or whether particularly Bev and Jonas for helping to make share this story, thank you so much. And I'm grateful to be part of this program today.
I can tell already. I mean, we've known you for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You have like this energy about you that I can tell you just get stuff done. And where did that come from?
Well, you probably are also people who get stuff done. That's why you're doing this podcast. And those listening in, you also get stuff done, and we need to get stuff done, because the main theme that I would like to share is that if we organize with love at the center, we can change this world. We can make it a more just and caring society. That in addition to being individuals, we're part of a broader society made stronger because we can act together and support each other. And an agency for supporting us is often a government when it's in our hands and not on our backs. And so the struggle for reproductive freedom is part of that struggle to also control a government and make sure it works for us.
Feels like a very heavy moment to be taking on that struggle. I think in particular, in light of Dobbs, when we think about for reproductive health, right, abortion was not easy to access across the country, but got much harder in many, many places, and got easier in some places too. But I wonder if you have been involved both deeply in the civil rights movement, in Jane, in working on congressional elections. But I'm wondering how this moment feels to you, and whether, does it feel dark to you if you look at the scope of the work that you've done over the last 50, 60 years?
We're facing extraordinary challenges, so many challenges that each day it's even hard to say, oh, this is the worst thing that happened. Oh, no, it's overwhelming. This is the flooding the zone. Are there international lawless murders going on caused by the government? Is it happening in our cities? I live in Washington, D.C. ICE is here. We don't need ICE in D.C. We don't need that National Guard in D.C. It's risking their lives. It's risking our lives. And so many of the freedoms we fought for are now in jeopardy because we have a government that is acting in lawless ways. For reproductive freedom, I actually became active on it by a fluke. It wasn't my plan. I had been in the civil rights movement. In 1960, I joined up in the demonstrations against Woolworths, which wouldn't allow African Americans to sit at their lunch counters in the South. And from there, I found the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the North called Friends of SNCC. And I went with them in 1960 to the Freedom Summer Project in Mississippi. And that was a time, many of your listeners probably know, when Northern students were recruited to support courageous African Americans in Mississippi who were threatened and brutalized often if they even just tried to vote and live with dignity. And during that summer, we tried to move voter registration. And when we were blocked, they formed a Freedom Democratic Party. And though during that summer there were great tragedies, including that 3 of the young volunteers were killed, and there are even greater tragedies, the family I lived with after the summer project, because of the ways they had fought for freedom, their house was firebombed twice. And in the second firebombing, this is Andrew and Mary Lou Hawkins' family, their son and 2 of their grandchildren were killed. And then later, Mrs. Hawkins was killed. And I mention it, just imagine there are 4 people in one family who were killed. And probably none of your listeners even know about it. And if they don't know about that, just think about the other families we don't know about. I only know about it because I lived with them.
Yeah.
But even with that struggle and those horrors, within a year, we won a Voting Rights Act. And for 50 years, that was the law of the land, imperfect, but moving forward. And for 50 years, we were expanding democracy, expanding freedom, expanding participation, and helping this country to live closer to its ideals and values. And so I draw heart from that, saying that when we organize, we do make a change, even when times are so oppressive. And in fact, for people in Mississippi, it was more oppressive then than it is now. But when we organize, when we are agents of hope and say we can make this change, if we organize, if we take action together, if we believe in each other, we have changed this world and we can change this world. I then returned back to where I'd been in school in Chicago after the Mississippi Freedom Summer Project in 1964. By 1965, I was on my campus, and a friend of mine told me his sister was pregnant and not ready to have a child, and could I help her find someone to provide an abortion? I didn't really know anything about it, Now, this was a much more innocent time. Remember, in 1965, many of us didn't even know how our own bodies functioned. There was a book, Our Bodies, Our Cells, from the early women's movement, and it sort of explained reproductive organs and internal workings because we knew so little. And sex was something you only talked about in the extreme privacy of a most intimate relations, or at least I did. Maybe I was a more innocent person in that more innocent time. But for whatever it was, I didn't really know about the issue. But believing that we act on our values, I said I would do what I could, really as a good deed, not as any big political action. And so I went to the Medical Committee for Human Rights, which was the medical arm of the civil rights movement. And I found an extraordinary doctor, T.R.M. Howard. And there's a book on him now called Black Maverick. And I didn't know this at the time, but he had been a great civil rights leader in Mississippi who came to Chicago when his name was on a Klan death list because he had called for the investigation into the murder of Emmett Till, the Chicago teenager who was killed when he was visiting his aunt in Mississippi. I also didn't know the background of Dr. Howard. It turns out he actually had a major women's health clinic on 63rd Street in the south side of Chicago. But I called him up. He said he would perform the procedure, and I thought that was it. I passed on the name and information, and I thought I'd done a good deed and really didn't think much more about it. But word must have spread, and someone else called me. I made that arrangement, and then someone else called. And when the calls kept coming in, I said, I better set up a system because I'm an organizer. You set up a system. And during that, I learned what's involved. What do you do beforehand? What do you do during? How do you advise people after? How much does it cost? At that point, it was $500 for one procedure, which in 1965 was an enormous amount of money. And also, I was a student. I had never seen that amount of money at one time, at least. And we negotiated on the price. More people were coming through. He said, could you do 2 for the price of 1? Could you do 3 for the price of 1? Someone's coming through and has no money at all. Could you just do that procedure? And we worked out an arrangement. Dr. Howard was remarkable. Now, I didn't know it at the time. I knew it wasn't legal. But 3 people talking about an abortion in Chicago in 1965 was a conspiracy to commit a very serious felony. And it also, I didn't know at that time in Chicago, there were septic abortion wards. There were hospital wards where women were dying every day, I'm told, because of injury they had done to themselves or someone else did to them, because it was illegal. And so it's driven underground. And so people go to desperate procedures. And it also means it often falls into the hands of illegal operators who are unscrupulous and in it for the money. And I decided we could set up a system that was in it for the caring and the love at the center. Now, over time, Dr. Howard was no longer able to respond. And it turns out, I learned later, he had been arrested and he never turned me in. What a remarkable person he was. And I found another provider. His name was Mike. And we set up the same system with Mike. And then so many were coming through that I recruited other women to it. And at that point, I was in grad school. I was working full time. I already was pregnant with my first child. I had gotten married in 1967. And by 1968, I started to recruit others into the system. Over time, as they worked with Mike, they decided that we should give the system a name. And we had originally called it ourselves, we called it the service. But we would say, why don't we call this Jane? So that you could say to people, pregnant, don't want to be, call Jane. And over time, so many people were calling Jane that Mike ended up asking the women who were counseling for help in doing the procedures. And so much help that he was actually teaching them how to do the procedures themselves. And then they found out that Mike wasn't a doctor. Now that was shocking because the women had been telling the people coming through that Mike was a doctor. Everyone believed Mike was a doctor. And Mike called him Dr. Mike. So it was a shocking moment because the women really were trying to be so honest and also trusting a medical provider. And then they realized if Mike could do it, and he wasn't a doctor, so could they. So it was not only challenging the laws on abortion, it was challenging a medical profession. And the women of Jane, caring about providing support, not for the money, but because of building a caring community, themselves provided 11,000 abortions before Roe. And that's the service that we call Jane.
It's really such an impressive story. And just think about all the domino effects of the work that the service had on these women's lives. 11,000 women, like you, changed the trajectory of their lives. And that's remarkable. It also strikes me that, you were putting yourself in the service of others through your civil rights work and through Jane, and it was pretty dangerous. And I'm curious how you faced that danger at the time.
There are different kinds of danger. There is the danger and fear of arrest. And the truth is we were trying to be very careful. We didn't really discuss it with anyone. It was years before I would discuss this publicly. And people were very responsible. In fact, it's funny, amongst the most responsible, caring people can be those who are living outside the law because you don't want to be arrested. And so you follow every law. I used to joke and say, I wouldn't litter. I crossed at the green, not in between. I was so law-abiding, unless you decide you have to stand up to illegitimate authority. But there are different kinds of dangers. On that kind of danger, I think in the story of Jane, fairly early on, we knew the police knew about it because some of the people who came through themselves worked for the police department or were the wives or children of people in the police department. And there are other things that indicated to us that the police knew about it. And in 1972, one of the women who came through Jane told her sister-in-law, and the sister-in-law very much opposed abortion, and so reported it to the police. And so the homicide squad broke into the front room where women were waiting before they had the procedures and arrested 7 of the women in Jane. And what happened was Roe was going through the courts, and once it went through the court, it became moot, the charges against those 7 women. And so the charges were dropped in the hands of a very good lawyer. So there are life dangers like that involved, as there was for the Hawkins family in Mississippi. Terrible dangers. But there are other kind of dangers that really are what many people face. And that's a danger of feeling, I'm not good enough, I don't know enough, I won't know what to do, I'm not smart enough, I'm not enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not enough. And so much of the society tells us we're not good enough. But in fact, my message out to those listening is you are more than enough. I didn't know anything when I started about this, but I asked one person who helped me find another, and we learned together. I had to learn all about this. And every day I'm learning. But together, we are more than enough. We are, as I think Gloria Steinem said, the leaders we have been waiting for. It's us. When I was in Mississippi, there was a saying sometimes people would say, are you willing to die for freedom? And now I think the issue is really, are you willing to live for freedom? Are you willing to do the work every day when it's too hot or too cold, or you're too tired, or it's too boring, or I've done this already before? But we may need to do this again. And the real question is, will we live our values and help others to build the kind of world and society we want to see for ourselves and our children, to have the options in our lives? I've never had to face the issue of abortion personally. I have 2 extremely wonderful children and 5 grandchildren. They were just here for Thanksgiving, a joy in my life. But it should be an option so that you have, if you want a family, you have the family you want when you're ready to have that family and love and support them. And I've had that luck and love in my life. I'm grateful for it. And I think that's an option that others should have also.
Much of what you talk about definitely relates to the reproductive justice movement of having a family when you want to have a family, being able to safely parent the children that you have. And so many of the issues that we're facing today really challenge our abilities to be good parents and to safely parent. You mentioned that ICE is in DC. ICE is also in our area. And so just thinking about the people we care for day to day that are facing that and unable to send their kids to school or unable to go to their prenatal appointments because ICE is around. And I think the reproductive justice movement was not active in the 70s. That came along later in the 90s and early 2000s. And I'm curious how you see that movement fitting with kind of how you did your work.
Well, first of all, there has been a action and organizing for reproductive freedom, in some ways, probably forever. There were midwives. There were people who would try and help others in need, help women in need. And at each point, there's been changes by the larger movements of the society. So just as the civil rights movement helped a reproductive freedom movement with the story of Jane, a women's movement helped all movements by saying women should be equal partners and equal players. And on reproductive freedom, the impact of a women's movement on women becoming doctors. You know, when I started, the only doctors I knew were men. Many were quite wonderful. My father was a doctor, brother's a doctor, his wife is a doctor, his son is a doctor. I mean, many wonderful physicians, but very few women were doctors. In fact, you probably know this joke, but I used to start talks I had in the early women's movement. I'd come out on the stage, and before I said anything else, I'd say, I want to, I'd share this riddle with people. The riddle is now famous, so you've probably heard it, but it's that a father and son are traveling down a road. There's a terrible accident. The father's killed. The son's taken to the emergency room. The surgeon comes in and looks down at the boy and says, "Oh my God, that's my son." And I would ask audiences, how could that be? And the answers in the 1960s were answers like, there was a transmigration of souls. So one soul went into the other. Or the doctor was also a priest, and so all children are his sons. And the answer, of course, is the surgeon is a woman. But in 1960s, women weren't doctors, so we didn't even have an image of it. And now I think the majority of people in medical school are women for a variety of reasons, but including that there's gender blind application. And a women's movement made that possible. So one movement helps another, and it's transformed the reproductive justice movement. It's expanded the definition of what we even mean by either reproductive and by justice. Whose lives does it really involve? And so the movements have changed over time. The biggest thing I think that's changed, though, is that we have changed. We now understand we need to take action and we can take action. And the opinions of the country have changed. There's now 60 or 70% of the country believe that abortion should be available in some or all cases. And so we've changed who we are, what public opinion is, what resources are available. And this horrible period we're in, this too shall pass, but it won't pass of its own doing. It will pass because we will take action. You are different. You are spreading the word. Those listening will take action. And when we trust each other and work together, we will build a more caring world.
We've talked to a lot of people, done a lot of interviews with people that I find incredibly brave, that put themselves in situations where I don't know if I would. There's some people that I think are braver, and I don't know what it is. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't exactly know what brave means in a funny way. I'm scared most of my life and most of the times. I'm scared about doing this podcast. I'm scared about, will I read my calendar right? Will I show up right? What happens if I give a talk? What happens if I work on a project and I don't really know what to do? I often feel I don't really know by myself. I don't feel I'm particularly smarter than anyone else. There are many skills I don't have. I don't have modern technology skills. What I do have is a belief that if we work together and show our caring for each other with honesty, that we'll learn together and we will be stronger together. And I do believe that there's courage that we can gain when we take action and are open to learning.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely talking to people, being in conversation with people that are doing this work, that gives me a lot of hope, just seeing how people have the resolve to keep moving forward even when it seems impossible. And that keeps me hopeful. I'm curious. I mean, you seem to have like hope in your core. But I'm curious, like, what are the things in your day-to-day that like give you hope and keep you going and keep you energized?
I have a phrase on my desk that says pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. So in our mind, we say this could go wrong and this could go wrong, and maybe this is not right, and let's prepare for the worst case scenario. And these bad things really are happening. But by God, we are going to drive forward in a thoughtful way, in a careful way. And I've seen it happen before. We have to remind ourselves, because we have survived this before, but only when people take action together. I'm now working on a project called Battleground Alliance, and it's designed to build coordinated efforts in 38 marginal congressional districts. It's not tied to any specific candidate or political party, but it is tied to winning back a Congress that works for people, and to overcome the meanness and the brutality and the lies and the grafting and the self-dealing of this period. If those listening in will join us with love at the center, we can build a better world. There are times that are rough. I'm not for fooling ourselves about how difficult these times are. I do think we need to be agents of hope, all of us. I'll tell you a story of what happened when the Dobbs decision came down. That was a pretty dramatic moment for me. I had expected the decision. It had been leaked just before. And that night, when it came through, I actually just thought, well, let's just keep on working. Let's just keep on driving forward, gather groups together. What's the state strategy? What's the legal strategy? Can we demonstrate? How do we persuade people? How do we build our political power? What are all the elements that we need? And I was getting calls from all over the country of people who were often in tears, what they feared, what they were losing for themselves, for their children. And that night I had tickets for a play with a friend. We were going to go see To Kill a Mockingbird. The story of To Kill a Mockingbird, people may remember, and maybe they read the book or maybe they saw the movie, is about a Black man in a Southern town who's wrongly accused of a rape he could not have committed. And the lawyer who defends him and the lawyer's daughter who befriends him. And the title even, To Kill a Mockingbird, comes because they say it's one thing to kill a jay or some other birds. I don't know that it's okay, but they harm other birds. They go after each other. But a mockingbird doesn't harm anyone. And I'm watching the play, sort of resenting that I'm there. And when it's clear that the man who's wrongly accused will be convicted, it absolutely broke me. And I just was sobbing in the theater. I can even feel it now. I'm sort of distraught by the whole concept. And it's partly that we had just lost reproductive freedom, this struggle I'd been part of for years. But it's tied to the struggle we lost. We were losing voting rights and civil rights and a rule of law and a sense of justice and a sense of a caring society. And we were killing the mockingbird. And I find it very painful and very hard. I take a lesson from that for myself on how we need to build community and caring, as well as the organizing for a better world. There's much more to the story, and maybe your listeners have even seen the movie that's named The Janes. There's another movie, there's one with Sigourney Weaver, who plays a version of me, and that's named Call Jane. And there are a number of movies and books and plays around it. And the real lesson of Jane is you can build a caring community. And when there is illegitimate authority, you need to stand up to illegitimate authority. And if you do, with love at the center, you can save lives, you can support people, and you can change this world.
What did you think when she said that Sigourney Weaver had played her in a movie?
I thought about who would play me in a movie, of course. Who would play you in a movie?
God, I don't know. I mean, they would need big red hair.
Big red hair. Well, we also know who would play me in a movie. So when we took on Jane as a producer, and she came to North Carolina to meet with us and make a storyboard, and so we're meeting, we're getting to know each other, but have just sort of, we're 1 hour in past the intros, and Jane turns to me and she goes, "Stop! Wait! I can't! I need to talk about this. People must tell you this all the time. You look just like Meryl Streep."
People had never told you that.
No, I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, but now I can't unsee it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it kind of works. I get it.
Do you think Meryl would play you?
Yeah, I why not, right? Opinions expressed on this podcast are our own. Philanthropy keeps this podcast ad-free. To donate, you can find a link in the show notes.
This podcast is executive produced by us, Dr. Bev Gray, Dr. Jonas Swartz, and Jane Marie. Production by Little Everywhere. Thanks to Nick Thorburn, Patrick Ford, and Maker for our score. And extra special thanks to Heather Booth for being an amazing advocate for abortion access and all things.